Have you ever wondered why you overreact? Overreactions are not what you think. The nervous system houses a subconscious and detailed catalog of everything we've experienced. Some are positive, some are negative, and our overreactions are almost like automatic programs or templates that are triggered when the right emotional switch is hit. If you have ever dealt with overreactions, and are ready to understand the why behind your behavior and why brain development matters, you are in the right place. Listen up. Welcome to Burnout Solutions, a podcast designed to help high achievers and healthcare professionals understand stress and how it can lead to burnout. Together, we'll explore how your brain and nervous system naturally work and why they sometimes hold you back, and how to overcome those challenges to fully enjoy the success you've worked so hard to create. I am your host, Mona Tippett, registered nurse, burnout coach, and resiliency educator. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are doing a little mini anatomy lesson, and there's some physiology in there, and I hope it's not going to be too boring. But what I want to do is explain how stress affects the brain and how the nervous system affects the brain when it's under stress and causes things like overreactions, avoidance, doing dumb things, being forgetful or clumsy. And I'm promised to keep it as simple as I can, and I hope to make it really relevant, and hopefully you can understand human behavior a little bit more. I have talked about this in previous episodes, but I really keep thinking that the why behind all of this behavior is how our brain and our nervous system were developed. So I'm just going to explain why you sometimes react in the ways that you do and how it's actually something that we can blame on our physiology. It's not just about self-control. It's just about how our brain and our nervous system were built. If you find this episode helpful, and if you find the science behind stress and burnout interesting, I'd love for you to go deeper into my course where I walk you through how your brain and nervous system work and how to retrain both of them so that they can work for you and not against you. I teach you how to work differently and not harder. And I will put the link in my show notes. I'm opening up my group course again in a few weeks, and it has just been so fun. So fun teaching in there and working with the people in that course. And actually, we were talking about this yesterday, and I said, just hold on. I'm going to make a podcast about this exact topic. So let's just dive in. The brain develops like an ice cream cone, and I'm going to use an ice cream cone as the metaphor today. So I want you to picture that the cone is the bottom of your brainstem. And what does the brainstem do? It's in charge of keeping you alive. Things like breathing, heart rate, digestion, temperature, it all runs completely automatic. And the diencephalon is like the ice cream that fills the cone and maybe comes a little bit out. It works very closely with the brainstem. And here we have arousal, sleep, appetite, movement, and things like that are also important to keep us alive. And again, ran automatically in our subconscious, something that we're not really working on thinking about. Once we have the cone and a little bit of ice cream, we have the first scoop. So as the brain develops, it develops up and out. And the first scoop of the ice cream is your midbrain or your limbic system. The limbic system is the emotional part of our brain. This is where the emotions live. And the key players here that we'll talk about are the amygdala, which scans for danger, and your hippocampus, which records emotional memories. And I'll go into detail in a little bit. And the final scoop, or the last part of your brain to develop, is your forebrain, and specifically the cortex and prefrontal cortex. This part of the brain is responsible for reasoning, for planning, empathy, creativity, and awareness. This is also where the concept of time happens. And this is really important to know that Our prefrontal cortex realizes things that are in the past, in the present, and helps us plan for things that are in the future. Time is very much a prefrontal cortex job. The prefrontal cortex also manages our body and space, which is called our proprioception. So it helps us be able to walk and talk at the same time. My daughter is going through a growth spurt right now, and she keeps stubbing her toe. That's because her brain hasn't caught up with the fact that her feet are growing a little bit, and it just hasn't caught up. I love watching high school basketball players because they sometimes look a little bit clumsy. I'm like, oh, they're going through a growth spurt. Their brain hasn't caught up to how to manage their body running, dribbling, passing. Those are all big things that our prefrontal cortex has to manage. So our prefrontal cortex manages everything of the brain when it can. And it's also important to know that your prefrontal cortex doesn't fully finish developing until your mid to late 20s, and it often develops earlier in females than males. Is that a shocker? Just kidding, all you males out there. But that does make sense. So why is it important to know this? Because your brain develops from the bottom up. So survival first, and then emotions, and very last is logic. And when you experience something in the world, when you have neural stimulus from your nervous system, and that stimulus is communicated to your brain processes the stimulus in that order. This is huge. So please remember that. First, the stimulus goes to the survival, and then emotions, and then logic is last. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit more about processing and how your brain processes the world. I've talked about this before, but your brain is getting input from your environment through your nervous system. So your nervous system is scanning and picking up on cues of things that you see, hear, smell, and taste, and feel, all through a process called neuroception. And this was a term coined by Stephen Porges. And the brain gets signals internally also from your body, like how fast your heart is beating, whether your stomach is clenched. It can feel your toes curled in your shoes. It can feel a tight jaw or a scowl on your face. It can feel your shoulders being tight, and all of the inside cues from your body communicating to your brain is called interoception. So once your nervous system is gathering all this evidence, it's giving it to the brain, and it goes up through the brainstem, and your brainstem checks those signals first. And the brainstem asks, am I safe? And then your limbic system chimes in, that's your emotional area, and says, is this good? Is this bad? Am I loved? Am I accepted here? What are my emotions in response to this neural activity? And then finally, your prefrontal cortex gets a turn. What can I learn from this? Can I problem solve? Is this stimulus meaningful? How do I want to act in this situation? How do I want to respond here? What are my goals? What are my intentions? What are my core values, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, but here's the catch. If the brainstem and the limbic system decide that something isn't safe, or decide that your emotions need to take over, your prefrontal cortex doesn't even get a vote. Your survival and instincts get first dibs on all sensory information. So your prefrontal cortex almost goes offline. It shuts down because it doesn't even get a vote in the situation, because your nervous system has felt and acted before we even had the chance to think, because our prefrontal cortex and logic is the very last step to get the neural stimulus. So that's how we can be hijacked by stress. That's how we overreact before we can even have a chance to make a logical choice. Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but let's zoom in on the amygdala and the hippocampus, which are inside the limbic system, and talk about the emotional center of the brain. So in my course, I talk about the amygdala is like a fire alarm. It's our stress responder. It detects danger real or perceived. It doesn't care if the threat is physical, emotional, or social. To the amygdala, pain is pain, hard is hard, danger is danger, and it reacts quickly. The hippocampus is the amygdala's bestie, as my daughters would say. They are tight. They are right next to each other. And as the amygdala is having a freak out, the hippocampus is frantically taking notes and recording the emotional experiences that the amygdala is having. What are we smelling, seeing, tasting, hearing in the situation? What are people's faces looking like? Where are we? Who are we with? And it's taking notes when the amygdala is firing. This way, the brain can use that information for future reference. The hippocampus is also very good at filing these memories and storing them. So that way, if something similar happens again, your amygdala can start to freak out. And the hippocampus says, oh yeah, remember when we were with this person and how we felt? Remember when we did this and this happened? So here's all the information that I've stored for you so that you can use it to support your freak out or not support your freak out. Okay. So let's give an example. If your brain and your amygdala and your body has learned that public speaking equals an embarrassment, your amygdala will sound the alarm the next time you grab a microphone, the next time you stand in front of a crowd, or sometimes even just a small group of people staring at you. It's similar enough that the amygdala starts to alarm and your hippocampus says, yes, remember, all this happened last time. We were embarrassed. We fumbled over our words. Everyone laughed at us. It was a disaster. Just don't speak right now. And our prefrontal cortex doesn't even have a chance to say, no, actually, I've prepared this speech. I want to give this. This is what I want to do. And our amygdala and the hippocampus, the emotional center of our brain, can hijack us. And often, you may have seen this, you may have experienced this. That is why your mind can go blank. Your heart is racing. Your cheeks get flushed. You freeze. You forget your lines because of the undercurrent of your amygdala and your hippocampus working furiously to protect you from the emotional danger of people's judgments, their opinions of you, the judgments of yourself, going to mess up. Maybe you're going to mess up. And that's a beautiful way of how our nervous system and our brain are trying to protect us, but in reality, they're not. Another example of something similar that kind of made me laugh as I was preparing this podcast just a few weeks ago, I was preparing to give my final presentation on this very subject about how stress works on the brain in my cohort and my forward-facing program. And I was presenting this to my mentor, Dr. Gentry, and all the people that I was with. And I have been studying this material for almost 2 years. So I know this material. I've studied it. I've used it already, incorporating it into my program, and it's been super helpful. However, all week, I had just this little reminder from my amygdala and this little undercurrent that this was a big deal. And because I'm still a recovering perfectionist, I spent a lot of time preparing. I was tweaking all my slides. I was re-listening to all the lectures. I was like literally writing word for word what Dr. Gentry had said and trying to change it into my own words. I was compiling all these notes. And by the end, I had like 14 pages of notes, right? It was crazy. I also realized during the whole week, I was more short with my family. I was forgetting appointments. My phone would alarm and I'm like, wait, what? What time is it? 3 o'clock? I'm behind. Kept getting caught off guard. I was getting lost in this frantic pace to get things done because I had to get this presentation done. And then I realized what I was doing. I was getting stressed out, and I used my tools that I'm teaching even in this lecture to calm my nervous system down. I took deep breaths. I realized that my amygdala and my hippocampus was trying to hijack my presentation. And so when I gave my presentation, I actually gave it without really using any of my 14 pages of notes. And I was able to successfully get my prefrontal cortex online for the most part. And I did a pretty good job. So I was glad I was able to see what was happening. And this is the best part, awareness. Just having awareness that this is what is happening can be super helpful. Okay, so let me talk a little bit more about our prefrontal cortex and what it does. So the prefrontal cortex is your inner CEO. This is what we want to have helping us as much as we can. And we want our prefrontal cortex to be online because it helps us reflect before we react. It helps us regulate our emotions. It helps us see other people's perspectives. It helps us plan and create and problem solve. And what I love is how it helps regulate our emotions. That it releases GABA, which is a neurotransmitter, and it calms the amygdala. And I like to think of it like a little warm blanket that wraps around the amygdala and the hippocampus and says, hey, it's okay. We can think this through. There's no emergency here. It's also interesting to know that under chronic stress, your prefrontal cortex can shrink a little bit and become out of touch with how you want to be. It's no longer the boss of your brain. And with neuroplasticity and with stressful things, and the hippocampus also can shrink under chronic stress. And so your amygdala has more free reign and it tends to be in the driver's seat when we are stressed. Maybe you've heard people say, oh, he has a trauma brain, or he's under a lot of stress. He's not thinking clearly right now. And that literally is true because the amygdala is running the show and we can get decision fatigue. We can treat people poorly. And this can be actually for years. Some people, like myself, have spent the majority of my life living in fight or flight and having anxiety and perfectionism and wanting to not be judged incorrectly. And all of that is driven by my emotional system of my brain. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the physiology of the stress, if I haven't made it clear yet. So when our nervous system, specifically our sympathetic nervous system, has an experience that it perceives as a threat, all of the neural excitation, the blood, the glucose, the oxygen, all of the body's resources are focused and concentrated in the hindbrain and the midbrain. So logic gets kicked out of the driver's seat, and we're operating mostly from our midbrain and hindbrain. So the prefrontal cortex doesn't get the blood flow to it. It's not able to work. And I like to picture this like a teeter-totter. When the limbic system goes up, the amygdala is firing off its stress alarm. The prefrontal cortex goes down. So it's up and down. And this can adjust quickly, sometimes not. But you can't be in survival mode with your brain being hijacked by your nervous system and be able to think clearly at the same time. I like to think that, when our prefrontal cortex helps us be able to walk and talk. Have you ever been walking and talking with somebody and something that you said makes them more emotional, and one of two things happens. They either walk more quickly and stop talking, or they stop walking and they look at you and they start talking slowly as they're processing the information. So this teeter-totter, Dr. Gentry likes to talk about it as your hand is holding a broom handle. It goes up and down all the time, sometimes really quickly, sometimes not. It takes practice to have that broom handle be even keeled, right? So when we get a significant stress or trigger, that's what can really tip the teeter-totter. And our amygdala is in control and our prefrontal cortex is not. So this is when we get snappy. This is when we shut down in a meeting or when something important comes up. This is when we start to cry over something that seems small from the outside. But internally, that was what broke the camel's back. This is when we can feel stuck or frozen or shut down, or we can stay up late watching TV or scrolling on our phone because our emotional brain is trying to avoid the danger, flee from the danger, or fight the danger. All of this is the sympathetic nervous system communicating to our brain, and our amygdala and our limbic system say, hey, we need to take care of this. No thanks, prefrontal cortex. We got this. So I hope that makes sense. I wanted to give a few examples. And the thing about this is I know everybody has examples every single day about how this plays out, but let's just talk about it. So I worked labor and delivery for several years, and sometimes during a code or during an emergency, I saw myself freezing. I saw other nurses, even with years of experience, freezing or getting frantic or yelling or acting in ways that really weren't helpful in that emergency. But just the urgency can overload our limbic system, and our body reacts before our training kicks in, before our logical brain has time to work. And so in those situations, we need to down-regulate. And actually, in all of these situations, we need to down-regulate. I just love life. It just teaches us so many great things. One day I was sitting at the nurse's station, super busy day. And a family member of a patient came and said, hey, I'm in room 12 and the phone's not working. And I was just listening, kind of from afar, charting. And I turned and I said, okay, so what's the problem? And that was kind of the tone. And her face was very offended. And I didn't mean to say it that way. And I tried to fix it. Okay, so, and I said, what's the problem? Meaning, what's wrong with the phone? Is it ringing? Is it not ringing? I walked down there and tried to make amends, but it was too late. And my reaction was offensive, and she told our nursing supervisor, and I got in trouble just from those 3 words. So what's the problem? Or 4 words. So my amygdala read her concern as one more threat to me and my time, and added up all this stress, after 8 hours of working with staff and people and trying to keep a happy face and charting and not being able to eat or use a restroom all day. Just that comment was what flipped my teeter-totter upside down, and the amygdala took over, and I did not respond like I wanted to. Have you ever taken a test or done something stupid and you think, why didn't I not do that? A lot of times I would, after working with a patient, I would come home and think, man, I should have done that differently. I wish I would have said this. I wish I would have done this differently. And our amygdala replays the worst case scenarios all night because now it's spinning out of control and saying, well, what if this? What if that? Why didn't you? You should have. That's all of the amygdala works. The should, the could, the I would. I'm an idiot. Why did I do that? That's your amygdala talking. Okay, here's another example. The other day, one of my children came and we were talking about one of the subjects. I'm trying to be super vague here because this was very recent. And my child said, I went to my teacher and asked this question. And his teacher looked at me with the side eye and with a face and said, are you serious that you don't know how to do this? And I tried to validate my child's feelings because that was not the response that this child nor I expected from a teacher asking a question. But I am sure that that teacher's nervous system was maxed out, and the whining and the question was just another danger to this teacher's time and all of her effort of what she had been teaching before, and probably was like a threat. Are you seriously not understanding what I'm teaching? So just an example, right? I hope you can relate to these. Let's see, another one. Oh, okay. I wrote these down. So have you ever been the partner that storms out of the room after an argument? The limbic system took over, saying, hey, it's time to get out. Before, my thinking brain could say, hey, why don't we calm down? Why don't we talk about this in a coherent, respectful way? Why don't we pause, take a deep breath? Remember that you actually love this person. You chose to marry them. Your relationship with this person matters more to me than proving the point of what color of shirt they were wearing or where we wanted to go to dinner that night or whatever, right? Another one, this is the last one I'm going to share. After a long drive home, because I was stuck in traffic, I come in and instead of making the meal of chicken and broccoli that was on the menu, I go into the kitchen and I grab a bag of potato chips and I just start eating. Why? Because my brain is in survival. My brain right now wants to feel good by eating something good. And my health goals are not in the picture. My logical brain doesn't have time to step in and say, oh, remember, potato chips aren't healthy for us and we actually don't want to eat those. My midbrain is just saying, I want to feel better right now. I want to eat something. I'm tired. I'm frustrated. I'm worn out. And whether or not the chips are good for you, your brain doesn't care. It just wants to feel good. And, the chips have the MSG and you get dopamine hits and it helps you feel good in that moment. Okay, so here is the best news ever. This is your pathophysiology. This is biology hijacking you. When you react in ways like this, it actually isn't your fault. And with practice, this is changeable. That's actually the best news, is that we can change. We can repair when we rupture. With awareness and practice, you can widen your window of tolerance. That's what it's called. Your window of tolerance is being able to handle stress without freaking out. And you can notice when your amygdala and your emotional brain is overreacting. You can learn to calm down your body and your nervous system and learn to invite your prefrontal cortex back online, even in the moment. And again, this is not about being perfect. It's about being aware, and it's choosing how to work with your brain instead of working against it. The other thing that I love about this, and I've said this before, this has helped me know the why behind human behavior, has helped me be able to rewrite the past in my mind and been able to give more compassion to other people. I now can see, hey, their behaviors were because they were being hijacked by their nervous system. This helps me understand when my PE teacher got mad at elementary school, when all the kids weren't listening, and all the basketballs came out and we just started dribbling with them and we weren't listening and he had to come apart and we ended up doing push-ups and then we were scared of him for the next month, right? That was just because his limbic system took over. I now can understand my parents getting upset when we didn't go outside to feed the calves on time. I was raised on a dairy farm. Feeding the cows and the calves were very important to my parents' livelihood. And so it was important that they got fed. And so we had to be there on time or we got yelled at. I get mad over shoes on the floor because I don't like tripping on them. And in my mind, they shouldn't be there. And that's a danger to my life. I could trip and die, right? Also, when I look back, when grandma came to visit and the house was a mess, she was not cheerful to be around. So when I can understand that all human behavior is regulated by our nervous system and that emotionally regulated people behave well, it helps me love and have more compassion behind poor behavior. It also helps me be aware of what's happening in the present. It can help me in the future act with intention and purpose because I understand that I have a say in my behavior and I can try over and over and over again. And that's the beauty of life. We get to try over and over again to put these things into practice, and also know that because I am a human and I have a human brain and a human nervous system, I will not be perfect, but I can act more intentionally when I try. So that's all I wanted to share today. I hope this made your brain feel a little bit more like a teammate and not an enemy or a mystery. And you can finally answer that question of why the heck did I do that? I hope this was helpful. I hope it was clear. I would love to answer any questions that you have about this. Again, I have incorporated so much of this into my program, the Mindful Method with Nervous System Resilience. It's a 12-week program that has videos and templates and explanations and practices that you can incorporate that have helped me and my clients change their life. And I don't say that lightly. It really is life-changing when you can become a different person because you learn to control and retrain your nervous system, and you can work differently in your relationships, in your work. You can overcome stress and burnout and really live with intention. So that is all for today. And until next time, just be kind to yourself and know that you are doing better than you think. And I encourage you to try and just this week, be aware when your amygdala and your limbic system is taking over. So we'll see you. Thanks for tuning in to Burnout Solutions. If you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And when you're ready to stop working harder and start working differently, head on over to my website at www.monatippets.com. That's TIPPETS. And grab my free resources on rewiring your brain and nervous system for less stress and more ease. Hope to connect with you soon. Take care.